Everything started out in chaos. The ingredients that would eventually make up the cosmos were already present, but they were all mixed together in a vast lack of meaning. This initial chaotic phase lasted for a very long time. This primordial chaos gave rise to the goddess Gaia, the Mother Earth, whose primary attribute was her extraordinary fertility. Our globe and the entire Earth were created by the goddess Gaia, who also gave birth to a number of primordial deities including Aureus, the mountain deity, and Pontus, the sea deity. During the night, Gaia gave birth to the deity Uranus, a supreme being who would represent heaven ruling over all. Uranus then married Gaia, and Nyx, the goddess of the night, also arose from chaos. She covered the skies every day with her black mountain at dusk. The results of Uranus and Gaia's union swiftly started to emerge. The goddess gave birth to monstrous creatures with terrible traits, such as the Cyclopes, strong one-eyed animals, and Hecatoncheires, monsters with 100 limbs and multiple heads. The second generation of gods, known as Titans, were also born by Uranus and Gaia. The heavenly god, seeing his mighty offspring, became afraid of being dethroned by them and acted accordingly. Uranus sent all of his children to Tartarus, a terrible place in the depths of the earth, where the Titans violently pounded the walls in an attempt to flee. They were imprisoned in Gaia's womb, and the revolt of such strong creatures caused their mother to suffer from excruciating pains. Gaia couldn't stand it any longer and made the decision to plot against her husband. The goddess asked one of her children to destroy Uranus, but all the Titans refused except Cronus, who was the most ambitious and believed he could do it. Cronus was given a diamond scythe and sent to the heavens with it. There, he discovered the supreme god dozing on a cloud. With a sickle stroke, the Titan castrated his father. When Uranus cried out in agony, the entire universe heard it. The sky turned crimson, Uranus' blood was flung into the sea, and other gods appeared in the water to provide fertilization. As the great hero of the revolt, Cronus triumphantly returned and released his brothers who had been imprisoned, and he was acclaimed as the new supreme monarch of the universe. After the banquet, the new sovereign was visited by his father Spectre, who gave him a terrible prophecy that stated that, like his father, who had been overthrown by a famous descendant, Cronus would also suffer a terrible fate of losing the supreme throne to his own son. Cronus did not free the Hecatoncheires and the Cyclopes because he believed they were extremely dangerous, and they stayed in Tartarus. After overthrowing his father and freeing the Titans, Cronus ruled supremely over the universe. Like his father, the god Uranus, Cronus started a despotic reign over the world with the Titans' help. Although he had no rival, the Titans suffered greatly because of the curse his father had cast, which stated that one of his sons would be accountable for his downfall. Cronus would stop at nothing to avoid such result. Titanide was married to the sovereign. All loved and adored by Awe, the queen of the Titans, Rhea soon gave birth to her first daughter, awakening in Cronus, his most monstrous side. In Cronus's eyes, Cronus saw his terrible future, and a terrible impulse caused the Titan to devour his first daughter, Hestia, one of the most loving deities ever. Cronus would take the newborns from their mother's arms, who helplessly tried in vain to stop the tyrant from devouring another of her children. But Rhea made a self-promise that she wouldn't allow that monster to devour another of her children. The queen became pregnant once more, but she had a strategy to protect her unborn child from her awful husband. In order to give birth away from Cronus, Rhea would hide in a cave on the island of Crete. She gave birth to a gorgeous child with extraordinary strength. For her kid, who was given the name Zeus, Rhea believed that the women of destiny had weaved a bright future. The queen wrapped a stone in a cloak and carried it to her husband after Rhea left her son in the care of the nymphs and Charybdis, who pounded their shields vigorously to silence the sound of the divine baby's mighty cry. Rhea presented the false infant to Cronus, who was waiting for her, preparing to eat another kid. As the queen sobbed on the ground, Cronus swallowed the stone without blinking, but this time her tears were filled with emotion rather than despair. On the island of Crete, Zeus was fed the milk of the Alphalphia goat, which strengthened him daily. A powerful eagle, which would later become his sacred bird, told Zeus about everything that was going on in the world. As an adult, Zeus was unexpectedly visited by Medes, a wise deity who gave him a gift that would decide his fate. Medicine told Zeus about his brother's terrible fate, that they were imprisoned in the Titan's stomach, but that Zeus could free the other gods with a potion. Mount Orthrus was visited by Zeus in disguise. He presented Cronus the potion at the fortress of the Titans, guaranteeing that the result would be a delicious treat. Cronus accepted the potion since he felt unstoppable and didn't think anybody would dare plot against him. The Titan drank all of the solution, which had a distinct taste, but Cronus soon started to feel sick, and the powerful Titan threw up all of his progeny. Hestia, Hera, Demeter, Hades, and Poseidon were all grown-ups who want retribution. Alongside his brothers, Cronus also vomited the stone that had tricked him. Zeus freed his relatives from Titan's stomach and organized a revolt that would alter the course of the universe. The Cronus, in order to construct the headquarters of the rebel gods who would oppose the rule of the giants, Zeus led his brothers to the summit of Mount Olympus, the tallest mountain in Greece. Cronus called all of his Titan allies to the great war from his throne on Mount Thres, and the Titan Atlas, the general of Cronus's army, led the onslaught against the Olympic gods. This rebellion gave rise to the Titanomachy, also known as the War of the Titans. Because of their tremendous physical might, the Titans started to impose themselves on the gods, and the plains of the Thessaly region served as the battlefield between their troops and the gods. Knowing the strength of the Titan army, Zeus sought reinforcements in Tartarus. In return, he set free the odd one-eyed beings known as Cyclopes, who created amazing weapons for the gods. Zeus was given his renowned and potent lightning bolt. With the help of the new web, the gods were able to defeat the enormous Titans. Poseidon was given a magnificent trident that could cause earthquakes and tsunamis, while Hades was given the Helm of Terror, which made him invisible. The army of Cronus threw entire mountains. In against the gods, the Titans and gods engaged in fierce hand-to-hand combat for nearly 10 years, with the Titans appearing to have the upper hand. Zeus made the decision to use 100 arms and 50 heads to free the terrifying Hecatoncheires of the Tartarus giants. The fight was significantly impacted by the terrible monsters. The Titans' army were terrified upon seeing them. Zeus used all of his strength to boost the energy of his strongest lightning bolt. When this hit Cronus's head, the universe trembled and the Titans were defeated and given exemplary punishment. Hecaton shared the duty of jailers, and Cronus and his companions were sentenced to an eternal life in Tartarus. The Olympic gods now ruled supremely under Zeus' command, and a new order began in the universe. Poseidon, the god of the seas, was one of the most powerful deities in Greek mythology. From his throne in his underwater palace, he exercised all of his power over the 7 seas together with his brothers Zeus and Hades. He defeated Cronus and his Titans during the infamous Titanomachy, and Poseidon was granted the dominion of the seas. Zeus was in command of the sky, and Hades dominated the underworld. Poseidon, the god of the waters, was quite erratic in his outbursts of rage. To travel out to the seas where there may be no return, earthquakes and tsunamis were created because of the unstable seas. Zeus believed he had discovered a way to lessen Poseidon's violent outbursts. The sea deity required a spouse. The ancient sea deity Nereus was asked by the Olympian lord to have one of his lovely daughters wed Poseidon, and he was honored to have one of his descendants reign over the seas. After learning that Nereus would allow one of his daughters to wed the god, Poseidon departed to meet his prospective wife. Then the Nereids escorted Nereus' daughter to the sea god so he could select his new bride. Although the Nereids were beautiful sea nymphs, Poseidon was particularly drawn to one female, Amphitrite. She stood out thanks to her black hair like the night. When the others saw her, the god already knew who his new wife would be. He set sail with a sultry look in his eyes to marry the lovely sea nymph, but the naive mermaid was turned off by Poseidon's attempt and ran away into the darkness of the ocean steppes. As a result, Poseidon searched the entire ocean for Amphitrite, but to no avail. The lack of romance made the god even more irate, and Zeus now became agitated over the whole thing, forcing Doris and Patricia's mother to reveal her daughter's location. Since she had no other choice, she did so out of fear of frightening the nymph once more. In order to persuade the Mariot to meet with him, Poseidon sent his devoted dolphin. The mermaid would eventually become the new queen of the seas in anticipation of her service to Poseidon, and Delphin the dolphin was transformed into a constellation. Poseidon and Amphitrite's union produced Triton, a god half-fish, half-man who would be Poseidon's messenger and heir. Amphitrite gave in to the claims of such a graceful creature and chose to return and give the god of the seas a shot. Zeus's plan seemed to have succeeded in making the seas less hazardous and more tranquil, but even his wife's charm could not quell the vengeful rage of the foreign lord of the seas. At the beginning of time, the Titans, strong gods descended from the primordial gods, ruled the earth. During the Titanomachy, the great war between gods and Titans for supreme power, Prometheus, a god as old as time itself, foresaw the future. He did not oppose Zeus during the conflict and managed to escape from being imprisoned in Tartarus along with the other Titans. After the conflict was over, Zeus gave Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus the task of creating and populating the land with the most diverse animals. Each animal was given a talent. The birds were given the ability to fly, the elephants were given great strength, and the talents were distributed evenly. The Titans had an abundance of raw materials, and Prometheus oversaw the production process while Epimetheus molded every type of creature. They saved man for last because they wanted to do something unique, but after shaping him out of clay, they discovered that all the talents had already been ascribed to the other animals. Humanity was created when Prometheus showed his creation to the goddess Athena, who was awestruck by the Titan's work and chose to bestow the divine breath upon it. However, Prometheus was unhappy with the outcome because he wanted man to be superior to all other animals. He was just a smarter monkey who lived in caves, avoiding all animals and surviving on fruits that fell to the ground out of fear and dread. Darkness Prometheus is advised by Athena to give man fire. As the sun set, the Titan made his way to Helios's carriage, which was anticipating a new day. Prometheus used fire to light the torch that humanity would be given. Zeus ruled that they would honor the gods by offering sacrifices, but Prometheus stepped in on behalf of humanity and stopped his creation from being exploited as man began to develop quickly, create weapons and tools, and take control of nature. Prometheus was finally happy that he was humanity's good maker as he watched this new creature bloom. With great cunning, Prometheus tried to trick God on behalf of humanity. Prometheus requested that a bull be offered as a sacrifice to the gods. The offering would be divided into two piles, one of which would be smaller but would contain the best. The other pile was larger but only contained bones and guts, which were wrapped in fat to make the offering appear appealing. The meats were covered in the animal's skin. The crafty Prometheus was correct in recognizing that he had been duped. He had known that Zeus's ambition would cause him to select the larger pile while man would take the best portion. Zeus was enraged at those who had tricked him and chose to take away humankind's fire. Without it, humanity began to regress, suffering from cold and darkness once more and being unable to prepare food. In order to restore fire control, Prometheus made the decision to steal the sacred fire and return it to humanity. He traveled to Olympus during the night and returned with the flame that had been taken from Hephaestus' forges. Humanity was flourishing again, yet the luminous at night, Zeus became interested in flames. Prometheus was imprisoned on a rock in the Caucasus to suffer after the supreme god, enraged, decreed that he could not escape punishment for his impudence. Eternal punishment for disobeying Zeus's commands, but Prometheus's punishment went beyond just life in jail. He would also endure excruciating torture. Zeus determined that his liver would be eaten by a terrible bird, causing him to suffer unimaginable agony. As an immortal titan, Prometheus's liver healed after being torn apart by the repulsive bird, only to be attacked by the animal again the following day. Zeus then came to Earth and offered him freedom if he kept the knowledge of fire from man as the benefactor of humanity. Prometheus rejected the offer and chose to sacrifice himself for his creation so that humanity could prosper as a result of Prometheus's martyrdom. The Titans Prometheus and Epimetheus created man at the beginning of time in order to support the growth of his creation. Prometheus pledged to take the sacred fire from the gods and give it to humanity. The Titan understood that he would not escape punishment for his crime and that the gods would eventually punish him. He also recognized that his brothers and humanity's futures were in jeopardy and counseled him accordingly. No matter what happens, Epimetheus, my dear brother, my misfortune will not be sufficient to withstand Zeus's wrath. Therefore, never take any gifts from the gods that might ensure the safety of our creation. As Prometheus had foreseen, Epimetheus gratefully accepted the counsel and promised him that he would not accept any gifts from the gods. Zeus came up with a scheme to oppose Epimetheus and humanity. Hephaestus was commanded by the Almighty to bear the first woman. After creating the most exquisite creature, the crafty god presented her to the gods, who bestowed upon her many gifts. Aphrodite bestowed upon her an unrivaled beauty. Hermes gave her the ability to speak, and the Charites lavished her with jewelry and clothing. Pandora became a lovely being. Zeus commanded Hermes to bring Pandora to Epimetheus as a present, but first he presented her with a lovely box, instructing her to offer the gift to men but to never open it. When Pandora first saw Epimetheus, he was so enthralled by the child's unfathomable beauty that he disregarded his brother's counsel to never accept gifts from the gods. After placing Pandora in a room of his palace, Epimetheus stood there ogling the exquisite box she had brought as a gift from the gods. Wondering what kind of present may be within the already exquisite box, Pandora couldn't help but be curious and chose to peer inside. Black mist began to emerge from the box as Pandora carefully opened it. The gullible young woman had no idea what was about to happen. The mist contained all the evils that Prometheus had not fostered in men until that point, when man was pure and living in the Golden Age, where there were no needs or conflicts and everything was blissful. But the box released all kinds of evils that would plague humanity. There was now envy, cruelty, greed, illness, and hunger in the realm of man. After Pandora's fruitless attempt to seal the box, the girl saw that all the evil had emerged, but there was still hope at the bottom. Hope gives people the strength to persevere in the face of evils and challenges. Zeus succeeded in extending the penalty meted out to men indefinitely. Zeus, the supreme god of Olympus, established himself as the ultimate ruler of the universe at the beginning of time. But before he had the goddess Hera as his queen, Zeus had another wife. Her name was Medes, and she was the daughter of Titan Ocean, who assisted Zeus in freeing his brothers from Cronus' stomach during the Titanomachy. Zeus was enthralled with the priceless deity and desired to wed her, but she resisted the god's advances. Medes made every effort to flee the god, but Zeus persisted. The goddess had the ability to change into anything, and she utilized this ability to get away from Zeus, but medicine was unable to keep Zeus from escaping forever. the Lord of Thunder set up an ambush for the disguised goddess, sprung on medicine, and seized her. The goddess was unable to flee the god's powerful arms and yielded to his command, with the crafty goddess by his side. The gods appeared to have conquered the chaos that had ruled the earth since the beginning of time during Zeus's reign, but a visit to Gaia, the primordial goddess who represents the earth, revealed a dire omen. Zeus was informed by Gaia that his wife would have 2 children, a girl who would be as strong and wise as her father and a male who would surpass him in strength and usurp his authority. Zeus was afraid of suffering the same fate as his father, the Titan Cronus, or his grandfather, the god Uranus, who had both been overthrown by their sons. However, motivated by his father, Zeus came up with a scheme to stop the omen from happening. Zeus asked Metis to change into a drop of water so that she could give him a taste of her metamorphic abilities. The god then swallowed his wife so that she wouldn't give birth to the creature that would dethrone Zeus. Zeus incorporated the goddess Metis' gift. As time went on, the all-powerful god started to experience headaches. He felt a terrible pain as if his head were about to blow up, but he was unaware that she was already pregnant. He became a lot smarter, fairer, and less impetuous god. Zeus demanded that his head be opened so that the source of the pain could be eliminated because he was unable to bear it. The Titan Prometheus struck the god in the head with an axe, and a bright light emerged from the crack in his head. A female figure appeared on Zeus's head, and the goddess Athena appeared from his forehead, fully armored and armed. Zeus was pleased to have given birth to that magnificent creature, and because of her mother's intelligence, Athena would grow up to be the goddess of wisdom. She was also regarded as the goddess of defensive warfare, so conflicts with Ares, the god of war, would inevitably arise. The prophecy that the couple would have a second child was never realized. Many believed that Athena was Zeus's legitimate heir and that she was his favored daughter. She proved to be a courageous, pure, just, and smart goddess. Before meeting Zeus, the lovely goddess Hera lived in the Garden of the Hesperides, which was regarded as one of the most beautiful places on Earth. The goddess rejected Zeus' advances because she knew he was a womanizer, but the great god didn't give up his new passion and devised a scheme to win her over. He took the form of a tiny bird called a cuckoo and created a lot of rain. The goddess wanted to comfort and warm the small bird since she felt unhappy to see it so chilly and drenched. Hera kept it near her body. Zeus used the circumstance to his advantage by taking the form of a bird and joining forces with the goddess. Zeus and Hera made the decision to throw a lavish wedding party to which all the gods were invited. Hermes was tasked with inviting all the gods and minor deities to the divine wedding, and when the guests began to arrive, only the notoriously lazy nymph colony had not shown up. Since Hermes was in charge of delivering the invitations, he feared that he would be held accountable for the guests' absence. The god arrived at the nymph's home and searched for Hermes, finding her asleep. The nymph replied that she was about to leave home and that he didn't need to worry. Feeling more at ease, the god quickly returned to the party, and Killene chose to sleep for just 5 more minutes. Much later, she woke up and walked slowly to the party. One step slower than the other, she was extremely lazy at the time and would have preferred to be in bed. Halfway there, she started to meet the guests who were already leaving the party, so she made the decision to head home because she didn't want to waste her time because, as Hermes had foreseen, he would ultimately be held accountable for the nymph's absence. Zeus and Hera did not think that Chalone could have committed such a disrespectful act, so they decided to visit her once more. When he saw that situation, Hermes became enraged and lifted Chalone's house off the ground and decided to punish the lazy nymph, saying, "You hate to stay away from your much treasured home, don't you? So from now on you'll have to carry it wherever you want to go." The guard threw the house over the nymph, which floated over the waters, and after the impact, Chalone appeared as a reptile. The nymph was punished, so she would now have to carry the house on her back, but her slowness and laziness remained. Hera, the queen of the Olympian gods, was thrilled to learn that she was finally expecting Zeus's child. She had high hopes for the child's beauty because he would be the son of the king and queen of heaven, but when she saw him for the first time, she was appalled to see that he was a rough-featured, hairy baby. Soot-covered dark skin, becoming even uglier as he cried the mad goddess, said that he was not her son and threw him into the ocean from the top of Olympus. The little god crashed violently into the ocean waters, but survived. However, he was crippled and limped for the rest of his life. Hephaestus was rescued by the oceanside Thetas. He quickly became attached to the child. Unlike the goddess, Hera Thetis took him to the island of Lemnos, where he grew up playing with volcanoes. From childhood, Hephaestus developed an unparalleled skill in the art of metallurgy. Using the heat of the volcanoes, he created the most powerful weapons and the most beautiful jewelry. The god came of age and decided to return to Olympus. He had produced a beautiful golden throne for his true mother, the goddess Hera. Upon seeing her strange son return, Hera felt chills run down her spine. But upon seeing the throne he brought with him, she quickly forgot her discomfort. She was pleased with the gift and was eager to try it on the throne. Divine, beautiful, and comfortable, however, As she tried to stand up, the goddess realized that she was bound to the throne, and no one seemed able to release her except Hephaestus, who knew the secret to freeing her. But to free her, he demanded that his mother and the court of Olympus stop treating him with contempt and accept him back into Olympus. Ashamed, the goddess accepted the demand and was freed, and began to treat him with due respect. Finally, Hephaestus made one last request which shocked everyone. Present, he asked for permission to marry Aphrodite. The most beautiful of the goddesses. Zeus realized that because of her enormous beauty, Aphrodite aroused passions among the beings of Olympus. Conflicts would emerge sooner or later. Therefore, even without consulting Aphrodite, Zeus forced her to marry Hephaestus to avoid future conflicts. The young Hephaestus came to be respected as a great deity. The god was a magnificent blacksmith. Among his greatest works were the sandals of Hermes, the armor of Achilles, the bow and arrow of Eros. He was a divine artist high on Olympus. The goddess Hera was furious. She had just discovered that the goddess Leto was pregnant by her husband Zeus. Furious, the goddess forbade Leto to give birth anywhere with solid ground, no land. Sheltered the pregnant goddess, she wandered a long time without any destination, feeling the pains of childbirth. Suddenly, she found the floating island of Delos. This island, not being connected to the earth, was not covered by the ban of the queen of the gods. Leto was able to give birth there. To her surprise, she did not give birth to only one child, but two. First, Artemis was born, and then Apollo. Apollo was beautiful and blonde, the perfect representation of the sun. After learning of Leto's children's birth, the goddess Hera went insane and sent the serpent Python to pursue and devour the newborns. The goddess Leto fled the world in search of the snake that was pursuing her and her children with the intention of devouring them. When she and her infant children became thirsty, she discovered a small pond on the bank, and obnoxious peasants violently forbade the goddess and her children from drinking water to stop her. Artemis had white skin and black hair that resembled the moon. The peasants used their feet to move the pond's bottom, allowing the mud to mix with the water and save it from being drunk in a fit of wrath. Leto turned the peasants into frogs, forcing them to spend the rest of their lives shrieking around the pond. The little gods grew up, and Zeus offered them very powerful bows made especially for them by Hephaestus. Artemis fell in love with the offer and began to dedicate her life to hunting. She became goddess of the hunt. Apollo, with the powerful bow in his hands, could only think of one thing: to take revenge on the serpent that tormented his mother for so long. Zeus told his son where the beast's lair was, and he headed there to kill it. The beast was in a cave at the foot of Mount Parnassus, where it hibernated as nothing threatened it. Apollo instigated the serpent to come out of hiding by shooting incandescent arrows into the cave. Python came out of the lair thirsty for blood, and wanting to devour its opponent. Apollo fired successive arrows at the monster, but they bounced off the hard scales that protected the snake. The god looked for a weak spot in the beast, while dodging its dangerous blows. Confident, the young man shot two arrows at once. One hit the python's eye and the other hit the beast's chest, which was covered by thinner scales. The heart had been wounded and the beast was roaring in pain. Apollo killed the beast by shooting a final arrow into its mouth. When the python died, Apollo ordered that a temple be built in its honor. This location became the Oracle of Delphi, where the most varied prophecies were made by priestesses known as Pythonesses. In ancient Greece, there was a region that is now Attica where Cyclopes ruled. Under his rule, the city of Cyclopes flourished, surrounded by the seas, and fishing was vital to the society, because a large portion of the food was taken from the sea because of its reliance on the sea. The cult of Poseidon was strong in the region. The god of the seas wanted a city that would glorify him, and for this reason he went to Cecropia. People of Cecropia, consecrate the city to the Lord of the seas, and you will have the ocean as your backyard. Your people will overtake all others. While you are on the seas, change the name of the city to Poseidonia, and you will receive my blessings. The god hit the ground with his trident, and a fountain of salt water began to gush forth. This is my gift to you before you leave. For the sea, kneel before the fountain, and it will tell you if it is safe to sail. Suddenly a strong flash interrupted Poseidon. In the middle of the light, there was the silhouette of a female figure. It was Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. The goddess also wanted to be the patroness of the city. The goddess addressed the crowd, who were already surprised by Poseidon's visit, and who now felt perplexed before such a majestic deity. Citizens of Attica, if you choose me as the protector of the city, beauty, wisdom will bear fruit in that city. The arts and sciences will develop like nowhere else in the world. The goddess struck her spear to the ground, and the beautiful olive tree was born in the hole. This is my gift. I am aware of how dry the earth is around you, but you can use the plant's oil to keep the dark out and warm your dwellings, and you can also eat the fruits. The gift left the people in awe. Cecropes, afraid of upsetting the eventually disregarded god, believed that the people of the city should choose which god to honor. The men from the sea all voted for Poseidon, while the women from the land believed that Athena's gifts were superior because there were more women than men in the city. When Athena prevailed, Poseidon became enraged and refused to accept the crowd's decision, believing that there was only one honorable way to choose: grab your weapons and fight me. One of the strongest gods, Poseidon thought Athena couldn't compete with him, but the courageous goddess was unflappable and ready for the conflict. The gods intended to resolve the conflict between Athena and Poseidon at the Council of the Gods of Olympus, where the fate of the city will be decided. The battle between the gods started and they measured forces. Zeus's bolt broke up the dispute. Zeus was the head of the meeting, and allowed the other gods to decide on the subject. All the male gods voted for Poseidon, and all the goddesses voted for Athena. As chairman of the board, Zeus abstained, and Athena was the winner by only one vote of difference. And so the ancient city of Cyclopes came to be known as Athens in honor of the goddess. A beautiful temple was built on top of the Acropolis in her honor. However, Poseidon's fury made life difficult for the Athenians. They were no longer welcome at sea. Concerned population went to the Oracle of Delphi. The Pythia told them that Poseidon's fury would only be diminished if Athena's women were punished to reconcile with the god. All the Athenian women lost the right to vote to seal the peace between Athena and Poseidon. A beautiful temple was built in honor of the god at Cape Sunyon. The god was magnanimous and forgave the people of Athena, allowing the city to keep the gift given by the god. Thus in Greece, a city emerged that would stand out from the rest. It took thousands of years for Athenian women to recover their right to vote. The sea water surrounding the island of Cyprus was getting milder, seemingly ready for the beautiful scene about to happen from the waters. The one to be deemed the most beautiful of all goddesses started to emerge after reaching Mount Olympus. Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and love and the daughter of Uranus, the god who previously ruled the earth, appeared on a shell. The gods were thrilled with the newcomer, who brightened the even more glorious home of the gods. Since Aphrodite arouses lust and pure envy in the gods, Zeus realized that such beauty would lead to arguments and discord. In order to prevent chaos, Zeus chose to unite the most beautiful goddess, Aphrodite, with the rustic-looking god, Hephaestus. Even though he had a rough exterior, Hephaestus was charming to his wife by using his skills to create and adorn her with the most exquisite diamonds. Aphrodite gave in to the will of the almighty god and joined forces with the god of the forges. Even Zeus, his father, had no pity for the god of war. He chose Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, as his favorite. However, one goddess, Aphrodite, was unable to withstand the reckless approach and bad boy manners of the god of war. He spent a lot of time working his forge in the Etna volcano, and in the meantime the goddess of love struggled with loneliness. Another god, Ares, the god of war, had a bad reputation. His unbridled outbursts of violence and bloodlust made him a person that mortals dreaded him as well. Ares's flawless athletic physique and breathtakingly beautiful eyes contrasted with the god Hephaestus, a rugged and crippled deity who had fallen from Olympus when he was still a baby. Aphrodite was sick of being so alone, so when the fiery goddess of love heard that Ares had returned from yet another of his wars, she got goosebumps and immediately offered to wash away all that blood. For a long time, no one on Olympus showed him any courtesy, and the insinuating Aphrodite began her seduction ritual. Poor Ares couldn't withstand the powers of love concealed, and the gods had a night of fiery love. From that day on, whenever Hephaestus left for work, Ares paid Aphrodite a visit on her marriage bed to avoid being noticed by Helios, the sun's personification and the top gossiper among deities. The god of sleep had already detected that something strange was occurring between the couple, but he didn't want to be regarded as a snitch, so Ares had Electrian watch over the entrance to Aphrodite's room and notify him if the sun ever came by Hypnos. The god of sleep then struck Electrian, causing him to feel the need to sleep so strongly that he fell asleep and failed to notice the sun coming. When Ares woke up, he saw that it was already day and the sun was furious with the couple. After Ares chooses to punish the careless watchman by turning him into a rooster, Electrian continues to yell until the sun rises. The god Helios told Hephaestus everything he had witnessed, but he refused to believe that his wife had betrayed him. He chose to set up a trap in case, "My beloved wife, I have a major job to do and I will be gone for a week." As soon as Hephaestus left, Ares leaped to the wife's bed, but this time the adulterous couple would not get away with it. The god of forges had woven a net so fine that it appeared invisible, placing it on the bed just as the gods were doing so, and the net fell on the couple, imprisoning them. The cuckold god summoned the other gods to witness the shameful scene, saying, "Look at these traitors caught in such a disgraceful situation. They can never leave my powerful net. They will remain imprisoned as punishment." Apparently Ares chose to focus on a more hand-to-hand battle, so to speak of all the punishments ever devised by the gods being united with Aphrodite, certainly must be unbearable. Poor Ares, Hermes said, turning to Apollo. All the gods began to laugh, ashamed and humiliated. Aphrodite and Deimos, Phobos, and the beautiful Harmonia were created when Hephaestus chose to divorce his wife from the coupling of Ares and Aphrodite. The Greek world was full of musicians and poets who sang the deeds of gods and heroes, but none of them could compare to Orpheus. He was the son of the muse Calliope, and the god Apollo. From his mother, he inherited an unsurpassed melodious voice, and from his father a talent for writing outstanding music. When he played his lyre offered by Apollo, the animals would calm down and stop to listen to him, and even the plants would swing to the music's rhythm. But Orpheus was not only a virtuous artist, he was also endowed with great courage. The young man was part of the Jason crew in his quest for the Golden Fleece. Thanks to Orpheus, the Argonauts escaped the seductive siren song, since the hero managed to muffle the deadly melody of sea creatures with his own music. After returning from the adventure, Orpheus met the beautiful Eurydice. Falling in love, Eurydice was the biggest fan of Orpheus's songs. The young lady's passion for the songs often made him jealous of his own compositions. During the couple's marriage dark Omens pointed to a turbulent future, but nevertheless the couple decided to live out their days as best they could. One day, while Eurydice was walking through the fields, she was spotted by Aristeus. The young woman, known as the beekeeper, fled from the man who intended to rape her, but she met her tragic end when she escaped through the grass. She was stung by a snake, and when she heard the news, Orpheus rushed to meet his beloved. The young woman died in her lover's arms before leaving for the kingdom of Hades, holding her beloved's body in his arms and using his strong voice. Orpheus let out the saddest lament of them, and the joy in his songs vanished. From that moment on, his miserable lyre only made depressing and melancholy noises. Orpheus turned to Zeus, the supreme Olympian god, and asked him to bring his beloved wife back to life. Zeus replied that he could not meddle in his brother Hades' affairs, but that he could travel to the world of the dead and speak with the underworld's god with Hermes and the messenger god by his side. The young guy warmed the boatman's heart with his melodic songs as Orpheus sank to the world of the dead. Cerberus, Hades' three-headed dog, was in charge of preventing intruders from entering his master's realm. Huran agreed to cross the river of the dead at the entrance of the underworld, and Orpheus played his lute and sang him a soft song that put the dog to sleep. The god said, "How dare you invade my domains, mortal creature? Tell me your motivation, or you will suffer in Tartarus for all eternity." Hades and his wife Persephone were furious when Orpheus appeared in their domains. "I begged you to let me return to the world of the living with my beloved Eurydice." Everyone could feel the boy's anguish as Orpheus played his harp, and the world of the dead paused to listen to him sing a melancholy song. For a moment, the Furies forgot to punish sinners and thieves, and Sisyphus ceased rolling his stone. Orpheus's music left everyone in a state of shock, and Hades was so moved by it that he shed an iron tear. Everyone was moved by the couple's reunion after Queen Persephone pleaded on behalf of Orpheus and Hades to bring Eurydice to them. At that point, Hades said, "You two are free to go, but you must go ahead and Eurydice will go right behind you, and under no circumstances can you look back, otherwise you will lose her again." Shadowy Root appeared. When he was nearly at the end of the tunnel and the sun was already shining on his eyes, Orpheus worried about whether Eurydice could follow him as he went the entire way back from the underground to the surface, and the couple started out for the world of the living. When Eurydice was drawn back into the world of the dead, Orpheus couldn't control himself and turned to make sure his beloved was there. He still tried to hold her hand, but it was too late. Desperate, Orpheus wanted to go back to the underworld, but Hermes stopped him in the desolate after Orpheus fell into a deep depression. His music never again found joy. Later, he was discovered by a group of Bacchantes, the Dionysus priestesses who wanted to sleep with the young man but who could only play and sing his melancholy songs. Enraged, the Bacchantes threw stones at Orpheus, but the music's power evaded them, so they decided to muffle it with bells, screams, and drums. Orpheus was killed and pierced by the Hecatoncheires, and his remains and lyre were dumped into the river. The dismayed muses then picked up his divine lyre and honored him by turning it into a constellation. Despite his tragic end, Orpheus's spirit was free to meet his beloved Eurydice in the Champs Elysees. The deity Dionysus, who was also the deity's master and foster parent in the far-off kingdom of Phrygia, was unable to find Silenus, his trusty drinking partner. Silenus was regarded as a sage who gave his best teachings while intoxicated and developing the gift of prophecy. There were days of drinking and feasting in honor of the distinguished guest. The god Dionysus was happy to find his old companion so well treated by his host, so he greeted King Midas, and as a sign of gratitude for the good deed decreed to fulfill any of Midas's wishes, he thanked King Midas for the wise old man who had been found unconscious in the forest by peasants after suffering from an alcoholic coma. Ambitious Midas made a snap decision without giving it much thought. "I want everything I touch to turn into gold. Are you sure?" "Yes, of course, I will be the richest man ever lived," Midas said. Dionysus granted his wish but felt bad for Midas since he hadn't made a better decision. In an attempt to test his new talent, Midas picked up a tiny stone from the ground and it instantly transformed into a gold nugget. Ecstatic after Midas touched a number of objects, they all instantly turned golden. The shrewd Midas tried a new strategy when he felt hungry and decided to eat an apple. When he touched the fruit, it changed into a replica of the golden palms in the gardens of the Hesperides. He took a fork, which quickly turned golden, and inserted it into a piece of bread. The king brought the fork to his mouth, but as he tried to bite into it, he felt his tooth crack because the bread had also turned gold. The king realized that what he had thought was a gift had become a curse. When the king's daughter came at the palace and found her father crying on the dining table, she tried to comfort him by touching his hand. Midas believed that his death was certain because he would soon perish without nourishment, so he sank in tears on the table. When Midas saw his daughter transformed into a gold statue, he knelt and begged the god Dionysus to take away that evil power. The god felt sorry for Midas because he didn't mean to hurt him, and his daughter Dionysus asked the king to submerge himself in the waters of the Pactolus River. Once in the water, Midas was bathed in the water, the riverbed turned to golden sand, and the fish's scales started to glitter like gold. The king was finally freed from the curse, and everything he touched, including his daughter's trauma, returned to normal. Midas gave up all material possessions and abandoned Pan to dwell modestly and quietly in the fields and woods. Because the Olympian gods had imprisoned the Titans in Tartarus, Gaia, the Earth Mother, was still very angry with them. As a result, she created a powerful offspring from Uranus' blood after his castration. These incredibly strong creatures were known as the Giants, and they formed an army of 24 giants whose only goal was to overthrow the gods of Mount Olympus. The Olympian gods united to fight these fierce foes in order to protect the new cosmic order and keep the world from devolving into chaos. The gods and giants engaged in combat, but it appeared that the gods could not defeat the giants despite their strongest blows. To her dismay, the goddess Hera foretold that the gods could only prevail with the aid of a strong mortal wearing a lion's skin, and there was only one man on Earth who met that description as Hercules. Zeus commanded Athena to find Hercules so that he could join the Olympian gods. The powerful giants were still unbeatable if they came into contact with the land where they had been born, which was close to Thrace. They started to pile up large stones in an attempt to reach the heavenly abode, but as they were focused on defending their building, they were startled by a terrifying roar. They fled without turning around, not realizing that it was only the howls of Selene's donkey that were bringing his student Dionysus into the fight with the reckless courage that only a completely drunk person possesses. Silenes chased after the giants mounted his distinguished animal, feeling like a paladin on a white horse. The giants reassembled and resumed fighting after understanding they had been duped, but Silenes' time was essential for the coming of Hercules the hero. Hercules used one of his arrows to bring down a giant, but as it hit the ground, the earth gave the giant new life. The gods understood that they would need to entice the giants to leave their homeland before they could defeat them, so they gave the giant a bear hug and carried him to a different area where he killed him with his club. The giant Porphyrion attempted to attack the goddess Hera, but was struck by an arrow from Eros. Despite his wounds, the giant persisted in his attack, but now, driven by pure lust, Zeus struck the creature with one of his most potent thunderbolts. Meanwhile, Ares valiantly fought the giants but ended up on his knees, but Apollo and Hercules used their bows to bring down another giant. The gods weakened the giants in preparation for Hercules to deliver the final blow, and the giants fell one after the other. Hecate burned the giants with her flames, while Dionysus defeated them with Tharsis strokes. When the giant Enceladus attempted to escape across the sea, Athena threw him a huge rock, which turned into the island of Sicily on the Italian peninsula. Hades also took part in the fight by using his fork and gave Hermes the helmet of invisibility, which allowed him to run through the giants at great speed while delivering blows with his caduceus. Ultimately, Zeus triumphantly paraded in his chariot over the bodies of the fallen giants with his scythe. Nike, the goddess of triumph, there was a stunning princess named Europa in the Phoenician kingdom of Tyre, and the hero Hercules was highly praised. Without him, the giants would have destroyed the universe. She was the daughter of King Agenor, a descendant of the highest Egyptian nobility. The king gave his lovely daughter a magnificent dress that had once belonged to her mother, the nymph Libya, who had received it as a gift from her lover Poseidon. The young girl shone with splendor while wearing the divinely made garment, so much so that Zeus on Olympus noticed her beauty. Later that night, the princess had an odd dream. When the winter emerged, the west-looking woman told the young Europa that she would one day be whisked away to a far-off land where she would be delivered to Zeus. Europa woke up terrified, but she wondered if what had happened was a real prophecy or just a nightmare. In the morning, the princess went for a walk by the sea with her friends, not realizing that Zeus, full of lust, was watching them. Zeus changed into a gorgeous white bull and chose to approach the girls. They saw the amazing animal right away and went up to him. The white bull seemed kind and had a lovely scent. One of the young ladies chose to ride the animal, but the gorgeous Princess Europa was faster, and with the assistance of her friends, she rode on the bull that had a bull-like body. Europa and her friends started to stroke the animal's smooth hide and were in awe of its beauty. The young ladies were ecstatic as Zeus took the princess carefully along the beach, and one of her companions said she also wanted to ride the horse. Zeus moved quickly in the direction of the sea. When the young girl and the bull entered the water, the animal swam brilliantly and seemed to be surfing the waves. Europa was thrilled by the experience, but she was terrified when she realized the bull was guiding her into the open sea. Fearing that she would drown, she clung to the animal as they sailed through the blue sea for a while until it was nightfall, at which point the bull led the young girl to dry land and then abandoned her. The young girl was terrified because she had no idea where she was. Europa was contemplating suicide when the stunning woman appeared in her dream. She was the goddess Aphrodite, who claimed that the princess had earned the right to be with such a lovely young woman in the west during her dream. The girl only wanted to know why she was there, and the goddess of love informed her that she had been abducted by a bovine named Zeus. She didn't need to worry though, because he would show the princess a lot of love and arrange for her future children to have great honors. Zeus then showed up and introduced himself to the young woman, telling her that they were in Crete, the place where the great god had been born, but that the island would now belong to Europa's descendants, with the gods Rhadamanthus and Minos being the offspring of Zeus and Europa, who would go on to become the legendary king of Crete. Europa became immortalized, as now all the lands of that distant region would be known by her name. Minos was sovereignly reigning over the island of Crete, a descendant of a rather distinguished lineage. He was the son of the princess Europa with Zeus, the lord of Olympus. The god turned himself into a white bull, and succeeded in kidnapping the maiden and taking her to the island of Crete. The couple had 3 sons, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Sarpedon, who would inherit the island of Crete. Minos succeeded in overruling his brothers and took the crown of the island of Crete for himself alone. The island was situated on a strategic route in the Mediterranean, which yielded great profits for the kingdom from trade with various nations. King Minos used his vast accumulated wealth to build the great palace of Knossos. To build his splendid palace, he got help from a brilliant Athenian architect, an inventor known as Daedalus. Notwithstanding his kingdom's tremendous development during his reign, Minos was still a dispute king. To solidify his power, Minos asked the gods for help. The king requested the god Poseidon to send him a bull for sacrifice in honor of the god of the seas, to show that the gods were on his side. In response to the king's request, Poseidon created a magnificent white bull out of the water that was just as gorgeous as the one Zeus had changed into in order to kidnap it. Europa, the king, chose to sacrifice a common bull from his herd rather than the one that Poseidon offered him, which infuriated the god of the seas, who had permitted that animal to be sacrificed for his own glory. Minos was so impressed by the size of the animal that he decided to prevent its sacrifice by adding it to his herd as a breeding bull, thus creating a breed of superior cattle. Poseidon could not tolerate such disrespect for the gods. The bull that God had given him turned into a furious and uncontrollable beast, damaging the kingdom of Minos and frightening the populace. But with Aphrodite's assistance, his retaliation was not yet finished. Poseidon made it possible for the queen and Minos' wife Pasiphae to fall in love with the bull. The queen attempted to approach the gorgeous bull, but the bull rejected her advances. Captivated by her love for the animal, she asked Daedalus to help her woo the great bull. The clever inventor came up with a novel idea and made a leather and wood replica of a cow with a chamber where Pasiphae would be kept. In this way, the queen was able to unite with the Minos bull, and the Minotaur, a creature half bull and half man, was born from this full union. King Minos was greatly embarrassed when the Minotaur's vicious and beastly character became uncontrollable as he matured. Minos commanded Daedalus to construct a massive labyrinth in which the terrifying Minotaur would be imprisoned. This labyrinth would eventually become the home of one of the most monstrous creatures in Greek mythology, which was fed on human sacrifices. However, the fear that the Minos monster had sparked would be put to rest when it faced a formidable foe called Theseus. Demeter, the Greek goddess of agriculture, traveled the world to bless plantations and was revered, and rituals were performed in the woods in her honor. However, at one of these ceremonies, as the devotees were making sacrifices to the goddess mother in the woods, the yells of a group of impolite woodcutters interrupted the ceremony. "Leave this forest immediately. I want that wood for my new palace." Eurycykthon, a rich and powerful nobleman of the region, was famous for not respecting the will of the gods, and he started cutting down the forest consecrated to Demeter. The greedy nobleman was amazed at the beauty of the consecrated oak, knocked down that oak, then used the wood to build the most beautiful furniture. The woodcutters hesitated. It was believed that the dryads lived inside the sacred oaks. They were the nymphs of the forest protected by Demeter. "Give me that axe now." When Ares thickened, struck. This sharp axe blood flowed from the open crevice hidden by a hood. A mysterious figure tried to peacefully prevent that barbarity. "How dare you bring down a forest dedicated to Demeter? No one else will touch these trees under penalty of suffering a terrible punishment. This forest is on my land, and I will do as I please." The tree cut down took the form of a nymph lying dead on the ground behind that hood. It was not an ordinary woman, but the goddess Demeter, who revealed herself with all her fury. "You dared to destroy, kill, and desecrate that which belonged to the gods, so you will pay for your crime in an exemplary manner." Terrified Eurycykthon and his servants fled in terror, but they were cursed by the goddess. The nobleman arrived at his palace exhausted, but he was glad to have avoided being hurt by the goddess' wrath. After the escape, Eurycykthon was hungry and asked the servants to bring him his food at the table. The nobleman attacked the roast chicken as though he had never eaten before, eating the rest of the food on the table and saying, "I want more, bring me more food." The butcher brought a whole piglet, and as soon as he got to the table, the lord grabbed it. He was exhausted and felt uneasy. He then went to his room with the little piglet leg, but while he was asleep, the demon who represents hunger paid him a visit. The demon attacked Eurycykthon, making him feel unendingly hungry. The nobleman woke up terrified and hungry like never before. Eurycykthon demanded a lavish feast to satisfy his hunger, and his servants provided him with all the food that was available. However, his hunger persisted, and he kept saying, "I want more," after each dish. Eurycykthon ate all of his flock, and his wealth decreased as he continued to buy more and more food over the course of several days. Ares thickened lost all of his money. "I want more. Once one of the wealthiest nobility in the area, he was now begging for food on the streets. His beloved daughter had found her father there and attempted to assist him, but he was so desperate that he sold his own daughter as a slave to get more food for his imprisonment. When Erysichthon's daughter prayed to Poseidon to help her escape, the god transformed her into a donkey, and through disguise she was able to get away. The daughter then met her impoverished father again, who was ruined and hungry. The good-hearted girl in her animal form thought she could help her father, and in tears she recognized his daughter's affectionate gaze on that donkey, caressed its face, and said, "I'm sorry, daughter of mine, but I want more." Poseidon felt compassion for the good-hearted young lady and transformed her into a butterfly. She fled and never saw her father again, famished and without money. In the early days, Zeus led the Olympian gods to victory over the Titans during the Titanomachy, a battle between the gods and Titans for control of the universe. Erysichthon returned to the sacred forest of Demeter where everything had started. He prayed for forgiveness, but the goddess ignored him. Poor man, in dire need of food, sat down beneath a tree and started eating his own foot, spending the night using his body as food. The following morning, nothing remained of him on earth. No other god had as much authority as Zeus, who ruled the world from his throne atop Mount Olympus. When the god raised his arm to reveal his powerful bolts, the other gods bowed in reverence. Only the goddess Hera was as revered as Zeus's wife, but even she was powerless to overrule the supreme god when he was unyielding. The other Olympian gods were also fed up with Zeus's conceit and egotism. He ordered and ruled the world according to his will, and under Hera's leadership, they decided to stage a coup against their sovereign. Zeus loved his wife, but he was unfaithful to her and had extramarital affairs, which is why he and Hera were constantly at odds because of the latter's infidelity. The goddess was tired of being humiliated by her husband and began planning an attack against the Lord of Olympus. The gods entered the room where Zeus slept in a magnificent crib, and Poseidon and Apollo took hold of his arms and used strong gold chains that Hephaestus had made to chain him to his bed. By the time Zeus realized what was happening, he was already immobilized and consumed by rage. The god made the most horrible threats, but the other gods ignored him because they were more concerned with who would take the throne. The goddess Hera, queen of Olympus and the leader of the rebellion, thought she was the obvious candidate to take her husband's throne, but there were other suitors. While Poseidon claimed to be the most powerful, Athena considered herself the most learned and elegant, and Apollo thought that only the sun god could illuminate this new cycle. Only Hestia chose not to seek for the office of Thetis, the daughter of Nereus, who foretold that a civil war would soon break out in Olympus. The battle between brothers may devastate the planet, and only Zeus's steady hand could prevent such a catastrophe. The fetus represented the formidable Briareus, the largest of the Hecatoncheires, a gigantic being with 50 heads and 100 arms. Because of Briareus's unwavering devotion to Zeus, he went to Olympus, where the gods were rendered motionless before such a beast. Then Hecatoncheires broke the chains that held Zeus, the supreme god, captive, released a powerful thunderclap that rocked the cosmos, and the gods involved in the coup surrendered by laying down their weapons, addressing a portion of the gods' wrath. Zeus had a special punishment for Apollo and Poseidon. The gods had to serve the Trojan king Laomedon and assist in the construction of the impenetrable Trojan walls. In the ancient city of Corinth, a rather crafty man named Sisyphus reigned. He was likely the smartest but not the wisest man of his time. Hera was punished for leading the rebellion against Zeus by being chained and hanging in the sky. She remained there until she took a solemn oath vowing she would never rebel against her husband again. Sisyphus was a direct descendant of Prometheus, a god who had the audacity to meddle in Zeus' affairs and paid a heavy price for it. Like his ancestor, Sisyphus chose to meddle in the affairs of the gods after witnessing the eagle-shaped Zeus kidnap the young and beautiful Aegina, and realizing he could profit from it despite ruling a magnificent city that had a drinking water shortage. Aesopus, a river deity, was very distressed by the disappearance of his daughter, young Aegina. Sisyphus went to Aesopus and said, "I know where your daughter is, but I want you to build a spring of water to supply my kingdom, but this information comes with a price." Aesopus produced a spring with the purest mineral water after accepting Sisyphus' offer. After Sisyphus told him what he knew, Aesopus went after his daughter. Sisyphus was happy that this new spring would bring prosperity and even greater prestige to his city. Zeus, the supreme lord of Olympus, was furious at Sisyphus' revelation and ordered Thanatos, also known as Death, to find him and kill him. He said, "So it seems my time has come. I did not expect to die so young, but I am much surprised by your splendor. Indeed, you are such a magnificent deity. You shall know that of the many gods I have known, few carry such a remarkable and elegant figure. And before I leave, I would like to present you with some ornaments that will make your presence even more dazzling after all these jewels will no longer be of use to me." With so many compliments, Thanatos felt gratified and chose to accept the presents. Sisyphus placed a pair of silver bracelets and a necklace on Thanatos, but those were actually shackles and a collar. The Corinthian king did what seemed impossible until he succeeded in cheating death, and Thanatos became his prisoner. The kingdom of Hades was no longer receiving any new subjects on the banks of the river Acheron, and the wars set by the god Ares were no longer enjoyable for him because no one died. The infuriated Ares went to Corinth, knocked down the palace door, and broke the chains that imprisoned Thanatos free. The god of the dead was certain of his first target and began looking for King Sisyphus to finish the task Zeus had given him. But Sisyphus anticipated that he told his wife that she would not perform the royal funeral services if he passed away too soon. Sisyphus delivered himself peacefully to Thanatos, who took his life. Charon was already waiting to lead him to the kingdom of Hades, the lord of the underworld. The banks of the river of the dead were filled with souls already on Vanitos's list, who only now had been sought upon arriving in the kingdom of Hades. He was face to face with the god of the underworld, who appeared quite unhappy after being severely admonished by the great god. Sisyphus delivered a speech he had already devised even before his death. Noble lord of the underworld, I'm aware of my wrongdoings against you and the harm I've caused, but that was not my intention. If I had known that I would harm the great god of the world of the dead, I never would have done so. Aware that I am in debt to you, I have a plea to make. My obnoxious wife refused to perform the proper funeral rites for a king who is so dear to his people. That abominable woman tossed me out, as if I were nothing but a dog carcass. I therefore beg you to let me return to the world of the living for only 1 day. You have my permission to spend 1 day in the land of the living, but by nightfall you must return to my domain so that I can exact retribution on my wife and arrange a fitting funeral that honors the kingdom of the dead. After promising to return right away, Sisyphus went back to Corinth, where he rejoined his wife and escaped with her once more. He had eluded death, which was now hidden. Sisyphus had a long life and grew old until he met his unavoidable demise and ran into Thanatos again, where his cunning was no longer of any use. Hades banished him to Tartarus after he returned to the underworld, where he endured horrendous torture. Sisyphus had to roll a heavy boulder from an airplane to the top of a mountain, but as he approached the top, the boulder grew dreadfully heavy and rolled back to the beginning. As a result, Sisyphus was destined to repeat his task in the far-off kingdom of Phrygia for all eternity. Due to his noble ancestry, Tantalus, son of Zeus, and Princess Pluto enjoyed privileges at Olympus, including sharing a table with the gods during banquets. Despite being entitled to all of the gods' hospitality during his visit, Tantalus did not show respect for his hosts. After departing Olympus, Tantalus shared the secrets of the gods which he heard during the banquets. In another episode, he stole some nectar and ambrosia from the gods' table, which gave immortality, so he was only allowed to be with the gods. Because of their omniscience, the gods knew what Tantalus was doing, but because they enjoyed his company, they ignored his actions and did not punish him. Tantalus planned to host a banquet in his palace, as a way of returning the gods' hospitality. Zeus, Hermes, and Demeter accepted the invitation, and the king helped with the banquet's preparations because he wanted everything to go perfectly so the gods might bestow upon him even more blessings. The young Pelops walked radiantly towards his room to get ready for the banquet after he called his son Pelops and said, "My son, you will have the honor to share the table with the gods of Olympus today." "Thank you, my dear father. Finally, I will have the privilege of being at the table in the presence of my glorious grandfather." Tantalus summoned the cook and instructed him to cook the most magnificent supper today. The cook, unable to conceal his worry, heard the monarch mumble something in his ear. When the gods arrived at the palace, they were greeted with great respect. The banquet began and the guests discussed a wide range of topics. Zeus then asked, "Where is my grandson?" You replied, "Don't worry, father of mine, he will be at the table with you soon." When the main course arrived, the cook brought a lovely stew with an unrivaled aroma. The stew was consumed by the goddess Demeter, who was deeply saddened by her daughter Persephone's departure to the land of Hades in an attempt to somewhat lift her spirits. "Don't you like my offering to the gods, you depraved creature? How dare you serve human meat to the gods? It's not just a human sacrifice, my father, it's the ultimate sacrifice." Tantalus delivered the stew to Zeus and Hermes, who exchanged suspicious looks. "I'm giving you the flesh of my firstborn son Demeter, who got ill after eating a big chunk of flesh. We've been kind with your earlier transgressions, but this calls for exemplary punishment." Tantalus was taken to Tartarus, where he would endure a horrible punishment. He was put in a lake with fruit trees surrounding it, and the water covered him up to his chin. The fruits were within his reach, but Tantalus was always experiencing extreme thirst and hunger. When he went to drink the water, the lake level also decreased, making it impossible for him to quench his thirst. When the hunger struck, he attempted to reach the fruits above his head, but the wind pushed the branches and the fruit away. The gods chose to bring the innocent Pelops back to life, making him even more gorgeous than before, but one of his shoulders, the one that the goddess ate to meet her, was gone. While his father endured eternal punishment and Tartarus had the objects of his desire both so close and yet so far away, Zeus requested Hephaestus to make an ivory shoulder for his grandson, who was brought back to life and became king of the Peloponnese. The king of Thessaly, Ixion, was a cunning man who commanded his realm with an iron fist. Only the best horses in Greece lived in the king's stud farm, and the monarch fell in love with the stunning Gaia, daughter of an Ionian aristocrat from the area. In exchange for the hand of the lovely young woman, Ixion promised Ixion some of his renowned horses. However, after getting married to Gaia, Ixion broke the agreement, which infuriated the now father-in-law, who took matters into his own hands and stole Ixion's horses. Ionius was asked to meet with Ixion at his palace under the guise of promoting peace, but Ixion was enraged and devised a scheme to exact revenge on his father-in-law. Ixion welcomed his father-in-law with open arms, but the king had a plot against his wife's father. The king invited Ixion to visit a new section of his palace that had a moat. When the visitor stretched his neck to see what was inside, his son-in-law shoved him into the embers-filled ditch. Ixion was consumed by the flames and cried out in agony to his satisfaction. Ixion saw his daughter's charred body next to him before he was consumed by the flames, but Ixion's sins would not be forgiven, and after years of suffering, the king was overthrown and turned into a vagrant who was stoned and spat everywhere. Ixion appeared to confess his sins and seek pardon from the gods. Zeus felt sorry for the guy who had previously been a great monarch and extended an invitation for him to come to Olympus. He attended celestial banquets and socialized with the Olympian gods, but his lack of morality returned. Ixion fell in love with Zeus's host, the goddess Hera, and even confessed to her his wish to have a sexual relationship with her. However, Hera rejected him and informed her husband everything, and Zeus did not think his visitor could pull off such a test action. Zeus created a cloud that resembled the goddess Hera. When the false goddess flirted with Ixion, he did not hesitate and joined forces with him. As a result of this transgression of hospitality, strange creatures known as centaurs were created, a hybrid of man and horse. Zeus expelled Ixion from Olympus, but he wasn't more merciless because he had some sympathy for Ixion because, as we know, the great god also had trouble controlling his lust. Zeus would later regret his indulgence. When Ixion returned to the land of mankind, he boasted that he had been with the Queen of Heaven and that Zeus, the greatest deity, was furious. Zeus then fulminated Ixion with one of his beams and threw his spirit into Tartarus, where he was placed on a blazing wheel. He would spend eternity burning in the spinning wheel while bound by serpents. Somewhere in Greece, among all the monsters that haunted the Hellenic people's nightmares, a cursed creature remained hidden. It was undoubtedly one of the most dreaded. Many brave heroes dared to hunt it, but none ever came back, claiming that it was so repulsive that no one could face it. Her name was Medusa, but she wasn't always that way. She was once among the most beautiful women to have ever lived. She was born as a typical child, the product of the union of Ceto and two primordial sea deities. Since childhood, Medusa had been devoted to the goddess Athena, and when she played with her sisters, she would always pretend to be the goddess Athena. Her sisters loved to play the villains alongside the girls, and she also played with a boy named Iphicles, who was Medusa's best friend. Uriel and Medusa were gorgons, creatures that combined female and serpent characteristics. The young woman began preparing to become an Athena priestess when she reached the appropriate age. The temple's apprentices had to have pristine conduct and discipline. All of their acts could be reflected in the goddess's reputation. One of the major requirements for becoming a priestess of Athena was absolute purity. They were to mirror themselves in Athena, so the young women should remain virgins just like their goddess, who never gave in to the influence of Eros and Aphrodite. Medusa became an ideal priestess, possibly too ideal, and her rites continued to draw more devotees who were thrilled with the way the stunning young lady carried out all of her tasks. When a naive man boldly asserted that Medusa's hair was more beautiful than Athena's, the goddess from Mount Olympus saw a commotion in one of her temples and realized that many people were there to see the charming priestess rather than to worship her. Medusa had lovely fluttering hair that captivated everyone who gazed at her. Athena resisted the urge to take any action against those who turned their attention away from her and toward Medusa. The goddess understood that even though this was incorrect, the young priestess was not at fault because, after all, she was simply carrying out her duties as best she could. Meanwhile, at Mount Olympus, Poseidon noticed the goddess' restlessness. The sea god and Athena had a fierce rivalry over who should be the patron deity of the city, which was the capital of the Attica region. The goddess prevailed in this contest, and the city was renamed Athens in honor of her new protective goddess. Poseidon was waiting for the ideal opportunity to exact revenge on the goddess, since he did not take defeat well. When the god saw that Athena was concentrating on her most exquisite and kind priestess, he determined that this lovely young woman might be utilized as a tool for his retaliation. While Medusa continued living her regular life without realizing that the Olympic gods were observing her, Poseidon planned to damage Athena's reputation by killing her most virtuous devotee. Though stunned by all of his splendor, Medusa did not forget her vows and rejected Poseidon's approach. He did not accept the rejection and grabbed Medusa's arm, and she reacted unexpectedly and violently, hitting him in the face and managing to get rid of the god. Medusa went past the sea, and the god of the seas followed her while hiding among the waves. She heard someone say her name, and the call came from the ocean. Poseidon, driven by passion, pursued the young woman after Medusa fled to Athena's temple, the only location where she felt secure. Even though the brave guy stood between God and Medusa when Poseidon was almost upon her, his bravery was insignificant since the god below threw the young man away. Medusa entered her goddess temple, bowed before her statue, and prayed for protection. As the god of the sea's heavy footsteps approached, the young woman who was surrounded called out for assistance. When the goddess Athena took the form of her statue, Medusa felt ashamed and filthy and angrily blamed the priestess. Athena claimed that if it hadn't been for her flamboyant presence, which distracted men from the path of virtue and purity, and for her vanity, which made her irresistible, none of that would have happened. Her temple would have remained immaculate, and her honor as a goddess would not have been diminished. Poseidon had possessed her on the goddess altar by force, and the god had happily left the temple with his retribution had gone better than expected. When nightfall fell and morality was restored, Athena made the decision to punish the priestess, who was now unclean and guilty of dishonoring the temple she was supposed to guard. After being struck severely, he became conscious and started looking for Medusa. He heard her sob in the temple of Athena, and when he got there, he saw her sitting on the ground, sobbing in the dark. She asked him not to approach because she didn't want to be seen that way, but her friend came anyway and offered consolation. But as soon as he touched the young woman's shoulder, a snake bit his hand. When Medusa turned in a terrifying manner and the two children exchanged glances, the young morally degenerated into a hopeless stone statue. Medusa sobbed while holding the statue of her best friend. She fled without hurting anyone else, but while she was doing so, some city dwellers sighted her, and those who looked into her eyes were terrified. They told one another about that terrible snake-haired creature, and a group was formed to hunt it down. These men were discovered. Days later, Medusa was terrified and completely petrified. She didn't intend to harm anyone, she just wanted to protect herself from unfair aggression, so she chose to hide in an area that had been deserted for centuries. There she discovered an old temple in ruins, which she used as her hiding place. Many warriors tried to capture the Gorgon for glory, but none ever came back, and Medusa continued to lose what little humanity she still had. Her reputation as a terrible monster became legendary. When Medusa came across an ancient bust that symbolized the goddess Athena, she realized that those ruins had once been among the first temples to provide sanctuary to the goddess. This revelation brought back her old habits. Medusa survived by hunting small animals and rodents, and one of her prey led to an unexpected reunion. The young woman continued to exhibit her nobility in her heavenly residence despite leading a miserable life. Medusa began to take care of the temple and to exalt the glory of the goddess, the dilettante daughter of Zeus, the supreme god of Olympus. The goddess did not overlook the noble deeds of her former priestess, realizing that her actions could not be justified by vanity because no one could witness them, and she felt bad for having inflicted such a harsh and irreversible punishment on the girl while performing one of her many rituals. When Medusa heard the footsteps of another invader, her bestiality returned, and she got ready to take on another brave foe. As she prepared the ambush, the warrior approached cautiously and the creature's abode. She was startled to see that he was carrying Athena's shield, the sacred aegis that had once belonged to Zeus. The warrior's shield was so perfectly polished that it reflected like a mirror, and he used the reflection to realize that the monster was behind him with a sharp blow. After finishing his labors, Perseus returned to Athena with her aegis and gave her Medusa's head. Little did anyone know that Medusa carried Poseidon's divine seed, from which the warrior of the golden sword, the Chrysaor, was born, and from her blood, another magnificent creature, a winged horse, also emerged. The young warrior severed Medusa's head from her body, and her blood continued to drip to the ground. Many thought that Athena's assistance to Perseus when she gave him her priceless shield was another act of revenge against Medusa, but in reality, she only wanted to release the young girl from that terrible existence that had been unfairly forced upon her. The majestic Pegasus was the purest of all creatures, embodying all the original purity that had been stolen from his mother. By putting the Gorgon's head to Medusa's shield, Athena exalted her. The image of the devoted priestess was now immortalized next to the goddess she adored. The young goddess exhibited herself on Mount Olympus, claiming to be the goddess of spring in her youthful beauty. The goddess of agriculture kept Aphrodite and her son Eros away from her daughter because her mother was overly protective and wanted her to maintain her purity and virginity, just as did the goddesses Athena, Artemis, and Hestia. The divinities of love did not want another divinity in Olympus to be immune to their influence, so they devised a plan to attack the young goddess far from Olympus in the depths of the earth. Another god who lived free from the influence of the gods of love was Hades, the lord of the underworld. The endless tasks of running his kingdom allowed Hades to think of nothing but his work, but a great tremor disturbed the kingdom of Hades, which surfaced to see the situation. The god heard a lovely voice coming from a neighboring forest as the Etna volcano erupted. indicating that Typhon, the monster whom Zeus had imprisoned, was very unhappy. Persephone sung in the woods without realizing that anyone was observing her. When Aphrodite and Eros saw Hades' interest in Persephone, they sought to seize the chance. With one of his golden arrows, the god of passion and love fulminated the god's heart, igniting passion and desire in the hearts of both gods and humans overwhelmed by passion. Hades went up to the spring goddess, but she was unaware of his approach. When the young woman rebuffed Hades' attempts at flirtation, he seized his beloved and the earth parted, allowing him to return to his realm while holding the goddess. The god of the dead entered his country through a tunnel. Persephone was extremely agitated and imprisoned in a room at Hades' palace until she calmed down. Hades then confessed his love for Persephone, who was still attempting to push him away despite feeling drawn to the god. Demeter became upset because she didn't know where her daughter was, so she set out to find Persephone. After much searching, she discovered one of the nymphs who used to go with her daughter, and she told her how Hades had abducted the girl and taken her to the underworld. When the earth opened, Demeter was furious and refused to forgive Gaia, the goddess of agriculture, who had participated in her daughter's kidnapping. Demeter was in charge of soil fertility, so she chose to render the land infertile as retribution. The goddess wept because she missed her daughter, and because she was so distraught she began to neglect her duties. Zeus began to worry about the state of the world since chaos would reignite if Demeter failed to complete her duties once more. The great god attempted to persuade Demeter to resume her duties, but she refused, stating that the world would stay sterile until she had her daughter back. Zeus promised that unless Persephone consumed some underworld fruit, she would be released from the underworld. Zeus's appeal, since Hermes was the conductor of souls and knew the complex pathways leading to the kingdom of Hades, he led Demeter to the underworld. The goddess met her daughter as she was eating pomegranate seeds that the underworld's lord had offered her. After consuming the fruit, Persephone changed into the underworld's queen, and Demeter chastised her for accepting the food from such a malevolent entity. Persephone claimed that despite everything else, her husband was not so horrible. He respected her and truly loved her, and she would be a real queen there. Demeter's heart ached so much that she began to cry, moved by his mother-in-law's sorrow. Hades offered a compromise. Persephone would spend a portion of the year in the underworld and the remainder with his mother on Earth. After the agreement was finalized, Persephone returned to Earth with her mother in the infertile ground, where many flowers grew and the harvests were abundant once more, but the meeting period ran out between Demeter and Persephone, and the young goddess went back to the underworld to see her husband once more. Adonis was a handsome young hunter who was wandering the woods in search of his prey. The flower nymphs worshipped him because of his striking beauty, which even attracted the attention of Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and love, who was playing in the forest with her son Eros sharpening his arrows. Demeter was saddened to see her daughter depart and neglected her duties once more. But when mother and daughter reunited, the world flourished once more and the seasons were born. The young man delighted the goddess, who then praised him to her son Eros. Envious, he became enraged and turned away from his mother, all the while hunting his golden arrows. Aphrodite told Eros not to be jealous because he would always be the most beautiful person in her eyes. She comforted him by hugging him, but she ended up hurting herself with the arrow Eros was holding. As a result, Aphrodite fell in love with Adonis. The goddess was snooping on the attractive young man, and she was unable to resist his charms and gave in to passion. Aphrodite asked the young man who he was because of his amazing beauty, which made him seem like a god. Adonis claimed that he was merely a mortal and not a god, since he knew that this beautiful woman could only be Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Because she was unaware that a man might be almost as flawless as a deity, Aphrodite was fascinated. Aphrodite, the couple kissed and started seeing one another frequently as he drew closer with such a seductive appearance that no god, much less immortal, could resist. Persephone, the queen of the underworld, was strolling through the woods one spring when she came upon the devoted couple. She was thrilled to see them, but she was unaware that Eros, the god of love, was about to play another practical joke on her. He shot her with one of his arrows. The queen was now in love with the boy and decided that Aphrodite should savor the moment while she could, because one day the lovely boy would be hers. In addition to Aphrodite and Persephone, there was another god watching over the boy. His name was Ares, the god of war, and he was Aphrodite's lover, so he harbored a deep hatred for his rival. Aphrodite was overly worried that Adonis would hurt himself on his hunts, but he kept assuring her that he was very experienced and would not take any chances. Ares planned his retaliation since he knew that the young man's passion for hunting surpassed his love for Aphrodite. Adonis fell while searching the woods for yet another victim. The young man eventually forgot his pledge to the goddess that he would not put himself in unnecessary danger after Ares stoked his bloodlust with a powerful boar. Ares pumped the beast's heart with unrestrained rage, and Adonis opted to battle the beast and wound it. The boar chose to assault Adonis in a fit of rage, driving its strong tusks into his abdomen instead of running away to save its life. As one goddess wept, another in the underworld was beaming and waiting for the arrival of the most beautiful man who had ever lived. The helpless goddess of love watched as Hermes arrived to carry Adonis's soul to Hades' realm after he was mortally wounded. Aphrodite ran to his aid, but there was nothing more she could do, so she buried him and beautiful red flowers grew in his tomb. Eros's arrow ignited a deep passion for the most beautiful man in the universe, and Queen Persephone in the netherworld eagerly awaited his arrival. Specters greeted Adonis with great honors as he entered the underworld. The boy was taken aback by the welcome and was unaware of the queen of the underworld's affection for him. The boy was launched by Persephone's faithful specters into a special room in the royal palace while Hades, the underworld lord, was asleep. His queen then broke into her guest chamber, cornering the young boy, but he tried to avoid her. He feared Hades' revenge, but the goddess assured him that if he didn't tell the god, she wouldn't tell him either. With no way out, he gave in to the goddess's lust, and the cunning encounters continued day after day. Aphrodite yearned for her lover, and immediately made the decision to descend to the Hades realm and save her beloved foreign Adonis, who was there serving the underworld gods, claiming she was there to bring her beloved Adonis back to the surface. But when the goddess of love invaded his realm and made demands, Hades was displeased. Hades informed her that he did not care about Aphrodite's wishes, that he valued Adonis' services, and that he would spend eternity in the underworld. However, Aphrodite threatened to wipe out all love from the planet, leaving only resentment and bitterness between the couples. When Hades expelled Aphrodite from his kingdom, she left in tears, but her threats were not in vain, as love between couples started to decline globally, and the normally tense relationship between Zeus and the goddess Hera became intolerable. Zeus made the decision that something needed to be done and summoned Hades, Persephone, and Aphrodite to a meeting. He explained that the situation could not continue and proposed that Hades take possession of Adonis, similar to the deal he had made with the goddess Demeter, whereby he would spend a third of the year in the underworld, the other third with Aphrodite on Earth, and the remaining third to enjoy however he pleased. Hades took issue with Zeus's intrusion into matters of his kingdom, but knowing that Adonis was Persephone's favorite servant, he said he would not accept such an offer to Hades' surprise. However, Persephone replied that if it was for the good of all, she would allow Adonis to resurface and return to her husband's kingdom, only when winter was approaching. Baffled, Hades did not understand why Persephone would release Adonis without putting up a fight. Spring arrived, and Adonis departed to meet his lover Aphrodite. Summer meant that the goddess Hades had not anticipated. Summer is also the time that Persephone comes out of the underworld to find her mother the goddess to meet her. And during the summer, Adonis and Persephone loved each other without bothering about being caught by the underworld king. But the quarrel between Persephone and Aphrodite remained. They always sought to maximize the length of their relationship with Adonis. This is why in some years the winter seems longer or the heat of summer persists foreign. The love story of Hades and Persephone is one of Greek mythology's most famous. You have certainly heard the story that the god kidnapped her, which gave rise to the seasons. But before he met Persephone, Hades had a lover named Mindy, a nymph who lived by the river Casitas. However, when Hades fell madly in love with Persephone, Minty was cast aside. Some say that when Persephone headed to the surface to spend the spring and summer with her mother, the nymph Nymphe would not leave the ruler of the underworld alone. But when Persephone returned, Hades would run straight into her arms, leaving the greenish nymph abandoned. Minty went on to brag that she was the most beautiful entity in the underworld, as even Hades could not resist her charms. The queen of the underworld, Persephone, furious, was incensed by these accusations and would not tolerate an insult to her dignity going unpunished. Because the scent of the plant covered up the smell of the dead, Persephone transformed the nymph into a plant called mint, which was used in funerals in ancient Greece. As a result, the plant, represented by the nymph Minty, was permanently confined to her lover's realms. Thank you.